I'm largely known in the media as an advocate for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and two-spirited people in Canada. I've become a staunch advocate since my sister was murdered 4 years ago. But in that work, I've learned of other discrepancies within policies and procedures that tend to isolate and segregate people from adequate health care. And I've noticed that with my most recent experience. I've been very vocal about my recovery, my road to sobriety in the last year. And because I had a lapse after testifying at the National Inquiry into Missing or Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, I was also told, because of my acute liver failure, which was brought on by acetaminophen, Tylenol, I wouldn't even be looked at for a transplant. I think one thing that I really want to drive forward here is the importance of people registering as donors. I know my little brother has a story about that. But registering as a donor and also revising these outdated, antiquated policies and procedures that section off a large population and I think that these situations should be looked at in a case-by-case basis. I didn't plan on becoming an advocate for this sort of cause, but the more I've been learning about it, even since coming to, I suppose, I was unconscious for a while. Seeing how many families have reached out and expressed that they have had to just accept the policy despite many other factors. It's very outdated, very antiquated, and something that needs to be revised and looked at. My cousin brought up that in Europe, you are automatically considered a donor unless you opt out. I think that's something that should be looked at as well. I don't know if you want to share about your interview the other day.
Yeah. So basically, I was talking about the importance of actually donating your, signing up to be a donor. As if you do not, like she said, it's basically a waste. If people were to have to opt out, then it would increase the amount of actual, potential transplants there could be, and there would not be issues like this that would affect so many families all across Canada, and as a result, it would just increase the quality of life as a whole.
And also, you hear stories of doctors who are approaching patients who are brain dead or otherwise going to recuperate, and they have to approach grieving families to see if they'll donate. They have to try and harvest these organs. It's making a more humane system, not only for an already very, very difficult profession, but it makes it easier on families, and it makes it more accessible in terms of these policies being more inclusive and accessible.
nurses and the doctors.
Yeah, and the nurses and the doctors, they have their hands tied in a lot of situations. You know, they wish they could help. They understand a patient's background, etc. But with certain policies and procedures in place, it's very difficult to do the best that they can. And yeah.
Okay, so at this stage, we can start fielding some questions. Yes. And maybe just say your name and your organization.
My name is Sean Thong. I'm with CTV News. If I ask just emotionally, the feeling of being faced with what you're faced with, knowing that there's a shortage, that in a sense you may not be considered when you think it could be.
Emotionally, I haven't been sleeping well lately, and that's a symptom of the acute liver failure. But I often thought about, like, while I was still, what's it called, the MELD score. The MELD score. I was on 39 of the MELD score, which determined I needed a transplant at that time. But there is a lot of moral dilemma around, like, who would I be taking a liver from? I don't want to do that, you know. But because that demand is so high, and because people aren't registering as donors, it's making a difficult situation even more impossible. I'm lucky to have a big family, and I've had strangers from across the country say, like, how much of my liver do you need? And, like, it's been, like, the outpouring of support has been beautiful and really, really encouraging. But I'm really feeling for the families who have lost loved ones due to these policies. Due to small technicalities and things that could have saved so many lives, you know. My little brother, as he said, he did an interview, and the cameraman was like, I'm going to register as a donor, you know. So I think that's something that I really encourage Canadians to do, is something that we can do to help alleviate that very, very, very intense stress on, you know, the need for organs. And yeah.
Delilah Saunders, City News. Just wondering, do you think these policies are a violation of one's human rights or one's rights to be?
I think you can speak more to that. Because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm still very new to this. I didn't plan on becoming an advocate for this. I'm a women's rights advocate. I'm a child's rights advocate. I speak to youth, and, you know, it just so happens that I also deal with mental health care. I'm an advocate, I suppose, but she can speak more to the legal human rights aspect of it.
And that's a very good question. So the policy that we are currently referring to in a pilot project is set to be suspended in August 2018. So there's already been some recognition by the government and policymakers that it is a problem. And what's important to know is that the 6-month sobriety period is a totally arbitrary number. It's not borne out in any science or statistics that someone who has previously suffered from alcohol abuse will revert to that or do any more damage to an organ than anyone who has no such history. And of course, alcoholism in particular is recognized as a disability and a disease. So to discriminate against a particular subset of already vulnerable people does to me seem like a human rights violation.
May I ask, what's the latest with your condition?
So far, I've made amazing progress in, like, my levels are, like, my kidneys and my liver levels are going back to normal. It's going to take a long time to actually recover. I have cankles now. I'm all like oozing from pores, from like IV drips and everything. It's not a fun process. I'm exhausted. I can't sleep. I'm experiencing auditory hallucinations because I'm not sleeping. It's exhausting. I'm not completely out of the woods. After this, the staff, the nurses, the doctors here have been amazing. Same as at Ottawa General. They've been amazing. It's unfortunate that there were policies that could have found me in a different fate, however. But my next step is to see a hepatologist and see what damage has been done for the long term. Right now, it's going to take a long time to get back to normal. I'm usually like, I'm a very fast walker, and I'm very active and traveling a lot, and so it's going to take some time to get back to that.
Any time been put on it? Like, did they tell you how long?
They're still waiting for my kidneys and stuff to go back to normal function. We don't have a date for me to be released yet. There's still, like, I'm still lacking in certain areas, like magnesium and that sort of thing. But it could take months to be able to just feel normal again. My body just went through a very traumatic experience, and it's going to be normal for me to be exhausted and unfortunately a little pudgy. So.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Any other outlets for the question? Okay. So at this stage, I think it's best that we wrap up unless there's any final words, and we can now, we'll wrap up.
I think I want to thank all Canadians, everyone who has really stood behind me, but also taken the time to educate themselves on this very serious issue and to reconsider their donor status. It's a form you fill out in Ontario, I know, and there are different processes, province to province, but it's definitely worthwhile. And I want to thank everybody for taking the time to do that.